In the summer of 1942, as the Third Reich tightened its grip on Europe, the city of Munich stood as a paradox, a vibrant cultural hub overshadowed by the oppressive ideology of the Nazi regime. Renowned for its art, architecture, and intellectual pursuits, Munich was also the birthplace of the Nazi Party, making it a focal point for both fervent nationalism and burgeoning dissent. Amidst this backdrop, a quiet rebellion began to take root within the walls of the University of Munich, where a group of young students dared to challenge the status quo. Among these students were Hans and Sophie Scholl, siblings whose transformation from enthusiastic supporters of the regime to ardent resistors would illuminate the path of moral courage in a time of darkness. Hans, a medical student, and Sophie, a philosophy and biology student, were raised in a family that valued free thought and ethical integrity. Their upbringing fostered a sense of individual responsibility, which would later propel them into the heart of the resistance movement. Initially, like many of their peers, they had embraced the ideals of the Hitler Youth, participating in its activities and absorbing the propaganda that glorified the Nazi cause. However, as the war progressed and the brutal realities of the regime became undeniably evident in the increasing persecution of Jews, the suppression of dissent, and the horrors of the Eastern Front, their enthusiasm began to wane. The Scholls were not alone in their awakening. They were joined by a small circle of like-minded friends, including Christoph Probst, a fellow medical student, Alexander Schmorell, a Russian-German artist with a passion for literature, and Willy Graf, a medical student driven by a strong sense of justice. Together, they formed the nucleus of what would become the White Rose, a nonviolent resistance group dedicated to opposing the Nazi regime through intellectual and moral means. Their discussions often revolved around philosophical texts, including the works of Goethe and Schiller, as well as the teachings of theologians like John Henry Newman. These texts provided a framework for their burgeoning resistance, emphasizing the importance of individual conscience and moral responsibility. When the group convened in secret, they grappled with the implications of their silence in the face of tyranny. They recognized that to remain passive was to condone the atrocities being committed in their name. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, initially dismissed their activities as youthful folly, underestimating the potential impact of their words. This derision, however, only served to embolden the young resistors, who saw it as an opportunity to operate under the radar. The stakes were high. The risks of being caught were immense, with severe consequences awaiting any dissenters. Yet, driven by a profound sense of moral duty, the group felt compelled to act. They understood that their silence would make them complicit in the regime's crimes. As summer faded into autumn, the group began to formulate a plan to awaken the conscience of the German people. They decided to harness the power of the written word, recognizing that literature could be a potent weapon against the regime's propaganda. Their weapon of choice would be the humble leaflet, a simple yet powerful medium through which they could disseminate their message of resistance and hope. The decision to produce and distribute leaflets was not made lightly. It required meticulous planning and a deep understanding of the risks involved. They knew that any misstep could lead to arrest and imprisonment, but the urgency of their mission outweighed their fears. The logistics of their operation were complex. They acquired a small hand-operated duplicating machine through clandestine means, allowing them to print their leaflets in secret. The process was labor-intensive, requiring careful coordination to avoid detection. Late into the night, they worked tirelessly, crafting their messages with precision and passion. Each leaflet was a labor of love, a testament to their commitment to the cause. The content was carefully crafted to resonate with their fellow Germans, urging them to reject the lies of the Nazi regime and embrace the principles of justice and humanity. The first leaflet, titled Leaflets of the White Rose, was distributed in June 1942. It began with a powerful declaration: "Nothing is so unworthy of a civilized nation as allowing itself to be governed without opposition by an irresponsible clique that has yielded to base instinct." The leaflet denounced the atrocities committed by the Nazis, including the persecution of Jews and the suppression of free thought. It called upon the German people to rise up and reclaim their dignity. Initially, the distribution was limited to Munich, where the group felt they could operate with relative safety. They left the leaflets in public places, university lecture halls, libraries, and telephone booths where they would be discovered by unsuspecting passersby. The response to their efforts was mixed. Some were moved by the message, while others dismissed it as the work of misguided idealists. Nevertheless, the White Rose remained undeterred, convinced that their words would eventually find fertile ground. When the leaflets began to circulate, the Gestapo took notice. Initially, they regarded the leaflets as a minor nuisance, a mere blip on their radar. They assumed that the authors were isolated individuals acting out of youthful rebellion rather than genuine conviction. This underestimation would prove to be a critical error, as the White Rose's message began to spread far beyond the confines of Munich. The birth of the White Rose marked the beginning of a new chapter in the resistance against the Nazi regime. What had started as a small group of students with a shared sense of moral outrage was rapidly evolving into a movement with the potential to challenge the very foundations of Nazi power. The resistance prepared for a confrontation that would test the courage and resolve of these young resistors, as well as the strength of their convictions. The autumn of 1942 marked a pivotal moment for the White Rose. With their resolve strengthened, Hans, Sophie, and their compatriots set about crafting their first leaflets with a renewed sense of purpose. The process was meticulous and fraught with danger, as they sought to balance the need for secrecy with the urgency of their message. They drew inspiration from a variety of sources, including the philosophical texts that had shaped their worldview and the harsh realities of life under Nazi rule. Munich, at this time, was a city teetering on the brink of despair. The war had taken its toll, with rationing and shortages becoming a part of daily life. Food was scarce, and the populace was subjected to relentless propaganda that glorified the Nazi regime while downplaying the grim realities of the war. The atmosphere was charged with fear, the Gestapo's presence was felt everywhere, and the consequences of dissent were dire. Yet, in this environment of oppression, the White Rose found its voice. The group worked tirelessly, often late into the night, to produce their leaflets. They used their small hand-operated duplicating machine to print their words onto paper, a process that required careful coordination to avoid detection. Each leaflet was a labor of love, a testament to their commitment to the cause. The content of the leaflets was carefully crafted to resonate with their fellow Germans. They called for passive resistance, urging citizens to sabotage the war effort in any way they could. They implored their readers to reject the lies of the Nazi regime and to embrace the principles of justice and humanity. The language was direct and uncompromising, reflecting the urgency of their mission. The first leaflet, titled Leaflets of the White Rose, appeared in June 1942. It began with a powerful declaration: "Nothing is so unworthy of a civilized nation as allowing itself to be governed without opposition by an irresponsible clique that has yielded to base instinct." The leaflet went on to denounce the atrocities committed by the Nazis, including the persecution of Jews and the suppression of free thought. It called on the German people to rise up and reclaim their dignity. By the time the group prepared to distribute their leaflets, they faced logistical challenges that required careful planning. They needed to identify locations where the leaflets would be most likely to reach sympathetic audiences. Public spaces such as university lecture halls, libraries, and parks became the primary targets. They would leave stacks of leaflets in these areas, hoping that those who found them would be moved to take action. The response was mixed. Some were inspired by the message, while others dismissed it as the work of misguided idealists. Nevertheless, the White Rose remained undeterred, convinced that their words would eventually find fertile ground. By the time the leaflets began to circulate, the Gestapo took notice. Initially, they regarded the leaflets as a minor nuisance, a mere blip on their radar. They assumed that the authors were isolated individuals acting out of youthful rebellion rather than genuine conviction. This underestimation would prove to be a critical error, as the White Rose's message began to spread far beyond the confines of Munich. The birth of the White Rose marked the beginning of a new chapter in the resistance against the Nazi regime. What had started as a small group of students with a shared sense of moral outrage was rapidly evolving into a movement with the potential to challenge the very foundations of Nazi power. The resistance prepared for a confrontation that would test the courage and resolve of these young resistors, as well as the strength of their convictions. As the new year of 1943 dawned, the White Rose intensified its efforts to spread its message of resistance. The group had grown more confident in its ability to evade detection, and its members were determined to reach as many people as possible. The leaflets, once confined to Munich, began to appear in cities across Germany, including Berlin, Hamburg, and Stuttgart. The message of the White Rose was resonating with a populace increasingly disillusioned by the war and the regime's oppressive policies. The leaflets were distributed through a network of sympathizers, many of whom were students or academics who shared the group's ideals. These individuals risked their lives to transport and distribute the leaflets, often traveling long distances to ensure that the message reached its intended audience. The operation required meticulous planning and coordination, as any misstep could lead to arrest and imprisonment. The content of the leaflets evolved as the group's understanding of the political landscape deepened. They continued to call for passive resistance, but also began to address the broader implications of Nazi ideology, highlighting the moral and ethical bankruptcy of the regime. The leaflets urged readers to consider the long-term consequences of their actions, both for themselves and for future generations. The third leaflet, distributed in the early months of 1943, struck a particularly resonant chord. It posed a direct challenge to the German people, asking, "Why do you allow these men who are in power to rob you step by step, openly and in secret, of one domain of your rights after another, until one day nothing at all, will be left but a mechanized state system presided over by criminals and drunkards?" The leaflet's stark language and urgent tone captured the growing sense of desperation felt by many Germans. As the leaflets continued to circulate, the Gestapo began to realize that they were dealing with a well-organized resistance movement rather than a simple printing error. Reports of the leaflets' distribution reached the highest levels of the Nazi hierarchy, prompting a concerted effort to identify and apprehend those responsible. The authorities intensified their surveillance of university campuses and increased their scrutiny of students and academics. Despite the heightened risk, the White Rose remained undeterred. The group continued to produce and distribute leaflets, driven by a deep sense of moral obligation. They understood that their actions could have dire consequences, but they were willing to pay the price for the sake of their beliefs. Their courage and determination inspired others to join the cause, swelling the ranks of the resistance. The confrontation between the White Rose and the Gestapo was reaching a critical juncture. The authorities were closing in, and the group's members knew that their time was running out. Yet, they remained steadfast in their commitment to the cause, determined to make their voices heard in the face of tyranny. The resistance prepared for a dramatic showdown that would test the limits of their resolve and the power of their ideas. In the wake of the leaflets' distribution, the atmosphere in Munich became increasingly charged. Students who had once been passive observers began to engage in discussions about the implications of the White Rose's message. The leaflets sparked debates in classrooms and cafes, igniting a flicker of hope among those who had long felt powerless. The group's words resonated with a growing number of individuals who were beginning to question the regime's propaganda and the moral implications of their own silence. The White Rose's leaflets were not merely calls to action. They were also philosophical treatises that challenged the very essence of Nazi ideology. They invoked the principles of justice, humanity, and individual conscience, urging readers to reflect on their complicity in the regime's atrocities. The group's writings drew upon a rich tradition of German literature and philosophy, weaving together the thoughts of thinkers like Kant and Schiller with the urgent realities of their time. This intellectual depth lent credibility to their cause, attracting a diverse audience that extended beyond the university walls. As the leaflets spread, the Gestapo's response became increasingly aggressive. They launched a campaign of intimidation, targeting students and faculty members who were suspected of harboring sympathies for the White Rose. Surveillance intensified, and the atmosphere of fear permeated the university. Yet, rather than silencing dissent, these tactics often had the opposite effect. The more the regime sought to suppress the White Rose, the more its message resonated with those who yearned for freedom. The effect of the White Rose's actions was felt beyond the confines of academia. The leaflets began to circulate in factories, among workers who were disillusioned with the war and the regime's promises of victory. The message of the White Rose transcended class and education, appealing to a broad spectrum of society. It became a rallying cry for those who had been marginalized by the regime, a testament to the power of collective resistance. In this charged environment, the group continued to refine its strategy. They recognized that the leaflets alone would not be enough to effect change. They needed to inspire direct action. The White Rose began to organize small gatherings, where individuals could come together to discuss their ideas and share their experiences. These meetings provided a safe space for dissenters to connect, fostering a sense of community among those who dared to resist. As the months passed, the White Rose's influence grew, and the Gestapo's desperation mounted. The regime's attempts to quash the movement only served to amplify its message. The leaflets became symbols of courage, inspiring acts of defiance across the country. Citizens began to engage in small acts of resistance, from refusing to salute Nazi officials to quietly aiding those persecuted by the regime. The White Rose's message was beginning to penetrate the fabric of German society, igniting a flicker of hope in a nation shrouded in darkness. The group's ability to articulate the moral imperative of resistance resonated with those who had long felt powerless, encouraging them to take a stand against the regime. The leaflets were no longer just pieces of paper. They had become instruments of change, galvanizing a movement that transcended the boundaries of the university. However, the stakes were rising. The Gestapo's surveillance intensified, and the risk of arrest loomed larger than ever. The members of the White Rose understood that their actions could lead to dire consequences, yet they remained resolute in their commitment to their cause. The urgency of their mission propelled them forward, as they recognized that the time for action was now. In the midst of this escalating confrontation, the group faced a critical decision. They could continue to operate in the shadows, distributing leaflets and organizing small gatherings, or they could take a more public stance, risking everything for the sake of their beliefs. The latter option was fraught with danger, but the members of the White Rose understood that the power of their message could not be contained. They were determined to make their voices heard, even if it meant facing the full wrath of the regime. As they deliberated, the group reflected on the words of their philosophical heroes, drawing strength from the ideals of justice and moral integrity that had inspired their resistance. They recognized that true courage lay not in the absence of fear, but in the willingness to act in spite of it. With this understanding, the White Rose resolved to escalate their efforts, fully aware of the risks involved. The confrontation between the White Rose and the Gestapo was reaching a fever pitch. The regime's attempts to silence dissent were met with increasing defiance, as the group's message continued to spread. The leaflets had become a lifeline for those who yearned for freedom, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of tyranny. The resistance prepared for a dramatic showdown that would test the limits of their resolve and the strength of their convictions. In the coming weeks, the White Rose would face its greatest challenge yet, as the Gestapo closed in on their operations. The members of the group understood that their time was running out, yet they remained steadfast in their commitment to their cause. They were determined to make their voices heard, even as the shadows of oppression loomed ever larger. As the confrontation escalated, the enduring legacy of the White Rose began to take shape. Their courage and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds would serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even when the cost is great. The resistance prepared for a dramatic confrontation that would resonate throughout history, a testament to the enduring power of resistance in the face of tyranny. In the early hours of February 18, 1943, the University of Munich was cloaked in a heavy silence, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of students hurrying to their lectures. Among them were Hans and Sophie Scholl, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Clutched in their hands were the latest leaflets of the White Rose, each one a call to conscience, a plea for action against the tyranny that had engulfed their homeland. The siblings moved swiftly, placing stacks of leaflets in strategic locations throughout the university. It was a bold move, one that would ultimately seal their fate. As they reached the atrium, Sophie impulsively scattered the remaining leaflets from the top of the staircase, watching as they fluttered down like rebellious snowflakes. This act of defiance did not go unnoticed. A janitor, loyal to the Nazi regime, reported their actions to the authorities. Within hours, the Gestapo descended upon the university, arresting Hans and Sophie. The siblings were taken to Wittelsbacher Palais, the Gestapo headquarters in Munich, where they faced relentless interrogation. Despite the intense pressure, they remained steadfast, refusing to betray their comrades. However, the Gestapo soon discovered incriminating evidence in Hans' possession, a draft of a leaflet and notes linking them to the White Rose. As the investigation unfolded, the Gestapo realized that the White Rose was not an isolated group of dissidents but part of a broader network of resistance. Leaflets had been found in major cities across Germany, from Hamburg to Berlin, each one a testament to the growing unrest among the populace. The Gestapo's initial dismissal of the movement as a minor nuisance was now replaced by a grim acknowledgement of its potential threat to the regime. The arrest of the Scholls sent shockwaves through the student community and beyond. News of their capture spread rapidly, igniting a mixture of fear and admiration among those who had read their words and shared their sentiments. The Gestapo's attempts to uncover the full extent of the White Rose network led to further arrests, including that of Christoph Probst, a close friend of the Scholls and a fellow member of the resistance. As the Gestapo intensified their efforts to dismantle the White Rose, the students' bravery and commitment to their cause became increasingly evident. During their interrogations, Hans and Sophie remained resolute, using every opportunity to articulate their beliefs and condemn the atrocities of the Nazi regime. Their courage in the face of such overwhelming odds inspired others to take a stand, even as the noose tightened around the resistance movement. The realization that the White Rose was not a mere printing error but a formidable force of dissent marked a turning point for the Gestapo. The regime's iron grip on Germany was not as unyielding as it seemed, and the seeds of resistance had taken root in the hearts of its citizens. The Scholls' arrest was a catalyst, galvanizing public sentiment and sowing the seeds of doubt in the minds of those who had long been complicit in the regime's actions. As the days passed, the atmosphere in Munich grew tense. The Gestapo's relentless pursuit of the White Rose led to a series of arrests, as they sought to identify and apprehend anyone associated with the group. The fear of reprisal hung heavy in the air, yet many individuals who had been inspired by the Scholls' courage began to engage in small acts of defiance, refusing to remain silent in the face of tyranny. The trial of Hans and Sophie Scholl, along with Christoph Probst, was set to take place just days after their arrest. The Volksgerichtshof, or People's Court, was notorious for its swift and brutal judgments against those deemed enemies of the state. The proceedings were designed to serve as a warning to any who dared to challenge the Nazi regime, yet the Scholls and Probst were determined to use the trial as a platform to voice their beliefs. As the trial approached, the Scholls' family and friends rallied to support them, recognizing the significance of their stand against the regime. The media, too, began to take notice, albeit cautiously. The account of the White Rose was beginning to resonate with a broader audience, and the regime's attempts to silence dissent only served to amplify their message. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Judge Roland Freisler, known for his theatrical demeanor and ruthless sentencing, presided over the proceedings. The trial was a spectacle of intimidation, designed to crush any semblance of dissent. Yet, despite the oppressive atmosphere, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph stood resolute, their dignity unshaken by the vitriol hurled at them. During the trial, the Scholls seized every opportunity to articulate their beliefs, transforming the proceedings into a platform for their message of resistance and moral integrity. Hans, in his final statement, declared, "Somebody, after all, had to make a start. What we wrote and said is also believed by many others. They just don't dare express themselves as we did." His words echoed through the courtroom, a defiant testament to the power of conviction in the face of tyranny. Sophie, too, remained unyielding, her courage shining through as she faced her accusers. "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause?" she asked, her voice steady and clear. Her unwavering resolve and moral clarity left an indelible mark on all who witnessed the proceedings. Despite their eloquence and bravery, the outcome of the trial was never in doubt. The verdict was swift and merciless: death by guillotine. The sentence was carried out the same day, a grim testament to the regime's determination to crush any semblance of dissent. As they faced their execution, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph remained steadfast, their spirits unbroken by the impending darkness. The execution of the Scholls and Probst sent shockwaves through Germany and beyond. Their martyrdom transformed them into symbols of resistance, their sacrifice galvanizing others to question their complicity in the Nazi regime. The Gestapo's attempt to silence the White Rose only amplified their message, as more citizens began to engage in acts of defiance, from small gestures of solidarity to more organized efforts against the Nazis. In the wake of their execution, the White Rose leaflets continued to circulate, smuggled across borders and reprinted by sympathetic allies. Their message of human dignity and resistance against oppression resonated with those who dared to oppose the regime, inspiring a new wave of resistance movements across Germany. The trial and execution of the Scholls and Probst marked a turning point in the history of the White Rose. Their courage and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds served as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even when the cost is great. Their legacy would endure, inspiring future generations to fight for justice and human rights, proving that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine brightly. As the news of their execution spread, the impact was profound. The White Rose had become a symbol of hope and defiance, their message resonating with those who had long been silenced by fear. The regime's attempts to suppress dissent only served to amplify their legacy, as citizens began to engage in acts of resistance, inspired by the Scholls' unwavering commitment to their beliefs. In the months that followed, the White Rose's influence continued to grow. Their leaflets became a rallying cry for those who yearned for freedom, inspiring acts of courage and solidarity across Germany. The regime's iron grip was beginning to show signs of weakness, as the seeds of resistance took root in the hearts of its citizens. The arrest and execution of the Scholls and Probst marked a pivotal moment in the struggle against the Nazi regime. Their bravery and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds served as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even when the cost is great. The enduring legacy of the White Rose would endure, inspiring future generations to fight for justice and human rights, proving that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine brightly. The trial of Hans and Sophie Scholl, along with Christoph Probst, commenced on February 22, 1943, in the Volksgerichtshof, the People's Court, presided over by the notorious judge Roland Freisler. Known for his harsh sentences and theatrical demeanor, Freisler epitomized the regime's ruthless pursuit of justice against those deemed enemies of the state. The courtroom was a spectacle of intimidation and propaganda, designed to serve as a warning to any who dared to challenge the Nazi regime. Yet, despite the oppressive atmosphere, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph stood resolute, their dignity unshaken by the vitriol hurled at them. They seized the opportunity to voice their beliefs, transforming the trial into a platform for their message of resistance and moral integrity. Hans, in his final statement, declared, "Somebody, after all, had to make a start. What we wrote and said is also believed by many others. They just don't dare express themselves as we did." His words echoed through the courtroom, a defiant testament to the power of conviction in the face of tyranny. Sophie, too, remained unyielding, her courage shining through as she faced her accusers. "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause?" she asked, her voice steady and clear. Her unwavering resolve and moral clarity left an indelible mark on all who witnessed the proceedings. Despite their eloquence and bravery, the outcome of the trial was never in doubt. The verdict was swift and merciless: death by guillotine. The sentence was carried out the same day, a grim testament to the regime's determination to crush any semblance of dissent. As they faced their execution, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph remained steadfast, their spirits unbroken by the impending darkness. The execution of the Scholls and Probst sent shockwaves through Germany and beyond. Their martyrdom transformed them into symbols of resistance, their sacrifice galvanizing others to question their complicity in the Nazi regime. The Gestapo's attempt to silence the White Rose only amplified their message, as more citizens began to engage in acts of defiance, from small gestures of solidarity to more organized efforts against the Nazis. In the wake of their execution, the White Rose leaflets continued to circulate, smuggled across borders and reprinted by sympathetic allies. Their message of human dignity and resistance against oppression resonated with those who dared to oppose the regime, inspiring a new wave of resistance movements across Germany. The trial and execution of the Scholls and Probst marked a turning point in the history of the White Rose. Their courage and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds served as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even when the cost is great. Their legacy would endure, inspiring future generations to fight for justice and human rights, proving that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine brightly. The consequences of their actions rippled far beyond the confines of the courtroom. In the immediate aftermath of their execution, the Nazi regime intensified its crackdown on dissent, fearing that the martyrdom of the Scholls would inspire a larger uprising. The Gestapo launched a series of raids across Germany, targeting universities and student organizations, seeking to root out any remaining sympathizers of the White Rose. The atmosphere of fear and paranoia deepened, as citizens were encouraged to report any suspicious activities, leading to an environment where trust was eroded and friendships were strained. Yet, paradoxically, the regime's heavy-handed response only served to embolden those who had been inspired by the Scholls. The execution of the White Rose members became a rallying cry for those who had remained silent, a stark reminder of the cost of inaction. In clandestine meetings, students and intellectuals began to discuss the implications of the Scholls' sacrifice, questioning their own roles in a society that had allowed such atrocities to occur. The moral dilemmas faced by individuals in Nazi Germany became more pronounced. Many began to grapple with the question of complicity versus resistance, weighing their safety against their conscience. As news of the Scholls' execution spread, it ignited a wave of protests among students in various cities. In Berlin, for instance, students at the University of Berlin organized a demonstration in memory of the White Rose, chanting slogans that echoed the sentiments of the leaflets. The authorities responded with brutal force, arresting dozens of participants and further tightening their grip on academic institutions. However, the protests marked a significant shift in the narrative. The youth of Germany were beginning to rise, fueled by a sense of moral urgency and a desire for change. The Scholls' trial and execution also had profound implications for the broader resistance movement. Their story began to circulate among various anti-Nazi groups, inspiring new alliances and collaborations. The moral clarity of the White Rose's message resonated with other resistance factions, including socialist and communist groups, who had previously operated in isolation. The shared understanding of the need for a united front against tyranny began to take shape, as disparate groups recognized that their collective strength could challenge the regime's oppressive hold. In the months that followed, the effect of the White Rose continued to grow. Their leaflets, now imbued with the enduring legacy of the Scholls, were reprinted and distributed with renewed vigor. The message of the White Rose evolved, incorporating the themes of sacrifice and martyrdom, urging citizens to honor the memory of those who had given their lives for the cause of freedom. The leaflets became not only a call to action but also a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance, a reminder that the fight against oppression was far from over. During the war progressed and the tide began to turn against the Axis powers, the enduring legacy of the White Rose took on new significance. Their message of passive resistance and moral integrity resonated with civilians and soldiers alike, many of whom had grown disillusioned with the regime's brutal tactics and unrelenting propaganda. Acts of defiance, both large and small, began to surface, each one a testament to the enduring power of the White Rose's legacy. The consequences of the Scholls' actions were profound, leading to a transformation in the landscape of resistance within Germany. Their martyrdom not only galvanized existing movements but also inspired new generations to question the status quo. The moral dilemmas faced by individuals in Nazi Germany became more pronounced, as the line between complicity and resistance blurred. The enduring legacy of the White Rose served as a powerful reminder that the fight for justice and human dignity was a collective responsibility, one that required courage and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds. In the final days of the war, as the Allies liberated concentration camps and uncovered the full extent of the regime's atrocities, the message of the White Rose took on a new urgency. Their call for moral integrity and resistance against oppression resonated with those who had survived the horrors of the Holocaust, serving as a beacon of hope for a future free from hatred and violence. The enduring legacy of the White Rose endured long after the war had ended, serving as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice. Their courage and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds inspired future generations to fight for justice and human rights, proving that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine brightly. In the aftermath of the Scholls' execution, the White Rose became a beacon of hope and defiance in a nation shrouded in fear and oppression. Their message, carried forth by the surviving members of the resistance and sympathetic allies, continued to inspire acts of courage and solidarity across Germany. The leaflets, no longer dismissed as a minor nuisance, had served as a rallying cry for those who dared to dream of a future free from tyranny. During the war dragged on and the tide began to turn against the Axis powers, the effect of the White Rose's actions became increasingly evident. Their message of passive resistance and moral integrity resonated with civilians and soldiers alike, many of whom had grown disillusioned with the regime's brutal tactics and unrelenting propaganda. Acts of defiance, both large and small, began to surface, each one a testament to the enduring power of the White Rose's legacy. In cities across Germany, clandestine groups formed, drawing inspiration from the Scholls and their fellow resistors. These groups engaged in a variety of activities, from distributing anti-Nazi literature to sabotaging military operations. Each act, no matter how small, chipped away at the regime's facade of invincibility, sowing seeds of doubt and dissent among the populace. The moral dilemmas faced by individuals in Nazi Germany became more pronounced. Many began to grapple with the question of complicity versus resistance, weighing their safety against their conscience. The White Rose's influence extended beyond Germany's borders, reaching occupied territories and allied nations. Their story of courage and conviction inspired resistance movements across Europe, each one united by a common goal: the defeat of fascism and the restoration of human dignity. The leaflets, translated into multiple languages, served as a testament to the universal struggle for freedom and justice. The moral clarity of the White Rose's message resonated with those who had been silenced, encouraging them to find their voices and stand against oppression. As the Allies advanced and the Nazi regime began to crumble, the enduring legacy of the White Rose took on new significance. Their sacrifice and unwavering commitment to their cause served as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against tyranny, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Their story became a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The moral dilemmas faced by individuals in Nazi Germany became more pronounced, as the line between complicity and resistance blurred. In the final days of the war, as the Allies liberated concentration camps and uncovered the full extent of the regime's atrocities, the message of the White Rose took on a new urgency. Their call for moral integrity and resistance against oppression resonated with those who had survived the horrors of the Holocaust, serving as a beacon of hope for a future free from hatred and violence. The enduring legacy of the White Rose endured long after the war had ended, serving as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice. In the post-war era, the account of the White Rose became an integral part of Germany's collective memory, a testament to the power of individual conviction in the face of overwhelming odds. Across Germany and beyond, the account of the White Rose continues to inspire movements for justice and human rights. Their message of resistance against oppression and the importance of moral integrity resonates with those who dare to challenge the status quo, serving as a beacon of hope for a more just and equitable world. In classrooms and lecture halls, the account of the White Rose is taught as a powerful example of the impact that individuals can have in the fight against tyranny. Their courage and convictions serve as a reminder that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine brightly, inspiring others to stand up for what is right and just. The enduring legacy of the White Rose extends beyond the borders of Germany, resonating with people around the world who continue to fight for justice and human rights. Their story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even when the cost is great. Their courage and conviction inspire future generations to fight for a better world, proving that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine brightly. In the aftermath of World War II, as Germany grappled with the consequences of its actions and the enormity of the Holocaust, the account of the White Rose emerged as a powerful symbol of moral courage and resistance against tyranny. The legacy of Hans and Sophie Scholl, along with Christoph Probst and their fellow resistors, became a cornerstone of Germany's collective memory, serving as a poignant reminder of the importance of standing up for justice and human rights. As the dust of war settled, the German people began to confront the dark chapters of their history. The White Rose's message of resistance and moral integrity resonated deeply within a society seeking to redefine itself in the wake of devastation. Memorials dedicated to the Scholls and their comrades were established across Germany, ensuring that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. At the University of Munich, where the Scholls had once walked the halls as students, a memorial was erected in their honor. The Geschwister Scholl Platz, named after the siblings, became a site of remembrance and reflection. Each year, students, faculty, and citizens gather to commemorate the anniversary of their execution on February 22, 1943. These gatherings serve as a solemn reminder of the cost of silence in the face of injustice and the enduring power of individual conviction. In addition to physical memorials, educational programs were developed to teach future generations about the White Rose and the broader context of resistance during the Nazi regime. Schools and universities incorporated the account of the Scholls into their curricula, emphasizing the importance of critical thinking, moral responsibility, and the courage to stand against oppression. The White Rose became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring students to engage in discussions about ethics, justice, and the role of individuals in shaping society. The enduring legacy of the White Rose also found expression in literature, film, and art. Numerous books and documentaries have been produced, exploring the lives and ideals of the Scholls and their comrades. These works not only recount the historical events but also delve into the philosophical underpinnings of their resistance, inviting audiences to reflect on the moral implications of their actions. The 1982 film, The White Rose, directed by Michael Verhoeven, brought their story to a wider audience, further cementing their place in the collective consciousness. The White Rose's legacy extended beyond mere commemoration. It played a significant role in shaping post-war German identity. In a nation grappling with guilt and shame over its past, the Scholl's story offered a narrative of hope and redemption. Their courage in the face of tyranny became a model for future generations, encouraging individuals to take a stand against injustice, even when it comes at a great personal cost. As Germany transitioned from a totalitarian regime to a democratic society, the ideals embodied by the White Rose became integral to the country's democratic values. The emphasis on human rights, freedom of expression, and the rule of law were directly influenced by the moral clarity demonstrated by the Scholls and their comrades. Their legacy served as a reminder that democracy is not merely a system of governance but a collective responsibility that requires active participation and vigilance. The White Rose also inspired movements for social justice and human rights within Germany and beyond. Their message resonated with those fighting against oppression, discrimination, and inequality, serving as a rallying cry for activists across various causes. From the civil rights movement in the United States to anti-apartheid struggles in South Africa, the Scholl's story became a symbol of resistance against injustice in all its forms. The effect of the White Rose extended far beyond Germany's borders, influencing resistance movements and human rights campaigns around the world. Their story became a universal symbol of the struggle against tyranny, inspiring individuals and groups committed to fighting for justice and equality. The leaflets of the White Rose, originally intended for a German audience, were translated into multiple languages and circulated among resistance movements in occupied territories and allied nations. In the decades following the war, the enduring legacy of the White Rose was embraced by various human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Their commitment to defending individual rights and freedoms echoed the principles championed by the Scholls, reinforcing the idea that the fight for justice is a global endeavor. The White Rose's message of moral integrity and courage became a guiding light for those advocating for change in oppressive regimes worldwide. The Scholls' story also found resonance in the context of the Cold War, as divided Germany grappled with the ideological battle between democracy and communism. Their legacy served as a reminder of the importance of dissent and the need to challenge oppressive systems, regardless of their political orientation. The White Rose became a symbol of hope for those living under authoritarian regimes, inspiring acts of resistance and solidarity. As the years passed and the world changed, the enduring legacy of the White Rose continued to hold relevance in contemporary discourse. In an era marked by rising authoritarianism, nationalism, and intolerance, the Scholls' message of moral courage and resistance remains as vital as ever. Their story serves as a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing and that individuals have the power to effect change, even in the face of overwhelming odds. In recent years, the White Rose has been invoked in discussions surrounding human rights abuses, political repression, and the importance of civic engagement. Activists and scholars draw parallels between the challenges faced by the Scholls and those confronting contemporary society, emphasizing the need for individuals to speak out against injustice and stand in solidarity with marginalized communities. The enduring legacy of the White Rose also resonates in the context of education and youth activism. Young people today, inspired by the Scholls' example, are increasingly engaged in social and political movements, advocating for climate justice, racial equality, and human rights. Their activism reflects the enduring power of the White Rose's message, as new generations take up the mantle of resistance and strive to create a more just and equitable world.